Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. In this video, I am going to talk about reverse culture shock, what it is, what it's looked like for me, and what I now expect when returning home to the US from another country. If you are new here, I have created this channel to help you learn about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. I have traveled the world, paid off a house in Spain, and I've made big moves toward financial independence. I believe that the road to financial freedom can and should be fun. I hope that you'll subscribe and join me on this journey, no matter where you are starting from. In the year 2000, I went on my first trip overseas to Paris. I fell in love with the city. Everything was beautiful, and the history had a richness to it that I had never experienced before. I remember saying that it made me feel like Europe was fine china and the US was like Tupperware. I'm not trying to be insulting to the US. Tupperware has its benefits, but there is just something different about a fine china experience. Then in 2011, I visited Haiti for the first time. This was just a year after the massive earthquake that struck Port-au-Prince. I flew by myself and was meeting a couple of guys from the organization I work for, although I didn't work for them at the time. This was more of a training trip. There was a nice French gentleman who helped me with my forms as we were flying into Port-au-Prince. We were in the customs line, and he asked me to hold his spot in line while he went to the bathroom. Suddenly, the line moved very quickly, and while he was still gone, it was my turn at the counter. There was an address field on my form that asked where I would be going. I didn't know, so I had left it blank. He was about to stamp my passport when he noticed that the address line was blank. Then he looked at me and with a very firm tone said, "Where are you going?" I just looked at him, feeling a bit nervous. He repeated a bit louder, "Where are you going?" I responded saying, "Port-au-Prince." He said, "No, Port-au-Prince, Port-au-Prince. Where are you going?" At this point, I was really scared and my face turned completely red. I didn't have any idea what to do and my phone wasn't going to work. Thankfully, the French gentleman returned and he saw that I was in a mess. He did a bit of translating for me and explained to the man that my group was outside waiting for me and that I could get the address from them. The man behind the booth kept my passport and my French friend guided me outside to find my friends and get the address. The interior that we walked through was basically like a warehouse with different luggage pieces everywhere. That was just the beginning. Although every person I met in Haiti after the customs officer were all quite lovely. I remember being in a minivan and we drove with the side door wide open. There was a lot of honking, but not out of annoyance like you might find in the US. It was almost as a way of communicating between the drivers. The roads were dusty. There were so many buildings that were in shambles from the earthquake. There were heaps of trash everywhere. We saw people bathing in rivers as we made the drive to the epicenter of where the earthquake happened. I remember my brain literally feeling overwhelmed by all that I was seeing, at a few moments having to close my eyes because my senses just felt so overwhelmed. It wasn't even the emotion of it. I was certainly experiencing culture shock. Culture shock is defined as the feeling of disorientation experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. That experience in Haiti was the first of many culture shock experiences. But culture shock doesn't have to be because of a bad experience. There is just something that our mind and bodies go through when we are exposed to new things, especially when away from the comfort of the familiar. Culture shock is likely something that you've heard of or maybe experienced if you have traveled abroad. Heck, I think it's possible to experience culture shock just going to a different place in the US. What may be a bit less familiar to you is a term called reverse culture shock. This term is typically used to describe a feeling of disorientation or emotional and psychological distress when someone has returned from living overseas. Through my work, I've led several mission trips to Haiti and have visited Iraq on a couple of occasions. I have learned that you can experience reverse culture shock after being away from home for just a short period of time as well. Reverse culture shock can make you feel disoriented, angry, frustrated, alienated, and more. For me, most of my reverse culture shock experiences have been after returning from Haiti, but I also experience reverse culture shock in smaller ways when I return from Europe or other Western countries. When you go to a place like Haiti, you see firsthand what extreme poverty looks like on a massive scale. Rice and beans accompany most meals. You have to wipe the mouthpiece of a refreshing cold soda because the sodas are cooled in ice, which is in water that could carry diseases. You have to shower with your mouth closed and use bottled water to brush your teeth. Although you may stay in a guest house that is very basic in comparison to where you live in the US, you still feel privileged because you see people living under small tents with dirt floors, and it's just everywhere. Living conditions like you've likely never imagined. And in the middle of all of this, there is a beauty, a simplicity to life. There is a pride among the people. Despite the worst of conditions, they steward what they have. Their hospitality is hard to believe. They have so little, yet they give so much. You experience these things, and it makes you wonder why in America we fill ourselves to the brim with stuff, 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 and more stuff. We fill our time with work, work, and more work. And yet there is a peace in some of the hardest places that no money we make and no amount of things we have can seem to give us. These things will still you. And then you come back to the US, and at first you are excited to tell everyone about what you saw, who you met, and what you learned. You quickly begin to realize that no one understands at all, and that they just don't care like you do. The only people that know are the people who you had the experience with. This can make you feel alienated and alone. It can also make you feel angry and frustrated. You can begin to feel bitter and angry at others for things that never would have bothered you before. I remember after leading a team to Haiti, we talked a bit during our trip about the reverse culture shock they should expect to experience. On the plane ride back to Florida, one of the ladies with us, with her great sense of humor, looked out the plane window as we were getting low over a Florida city, and she starts saying, "You have a lake and a pool? Why do you need a lake and a pool?" Everyone from our group had a good laugh about it, but it really is the reality of what you have to process. It's difficult to digest seeing people with very little and then being okay with people who have much more than they need. And we may struggle ourselves with how much we have and how best to steward it. On that same return trip from Haiti, we had to make a stop in Fort Lauderdale, so we decided to go into the city and get some food. While there, we saw someone pushing a dog in a stroller. I'm not here to judge anyone for pushing their pets around, but when you've come from seeing hungry children and then you see something so lavish for an animal, it's just hard to process. One of my other friends felt uncomfortable walking into her big, beautiful, immaculate kitchen. Another friend from our group said she felt like she should just take cold showers. But like I said before, not everything has to be about seeing people in poverty and the comparison of that to our lives in the US. One of the things that bothers me the most when I return from Europe is driving in America. I've spent a lot of time driving in Spain, and I absolutely love driving there. On highways between towns, people literally only use the left lane to pass, exactly like it's intended. They seem to follow the rules because there is an implied sense of duty to others and an understanding and care for the rules that help everyone. I remember returning from Spain and having to get a rental car and drive from Miami to Orlando. Just 30 minutes into my drive, and I was ready to pull my hair out. People have such an entitlement here, honestly, but I never would have noticed it if I had never left the country. It only became obvious because I had the opportunity to experience something different. When you first return from somewhere, you will be convinced that the passions about the new ways you feel will last forever. You may think that your clean kitchen, warm showers, or driving in America will never be like it used to be. You feel like you're on a mission. You want to tell everyone else and inspire change. But in reality, you will slowly begin to readjust. The things that bothered you when you first returned home will fade into the background. It's all just part of the process. Now that I've been through reverse culture shock on multiple occasions and have helped to guide many of my friends through it as well, I feel like I'm at least able to identify how I'm feeling. And I don't carry a lot of guilt anymore for letting those first returning passions fade. Feeling guilty is certainly something I've struggled with. That doesn't mean that we can't learn and still find small ways to steward the things we have and the time we are given just a little bit better. Have you ever experienced reverse culture shock? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I would also love to hear about people who have traveled to the US if you aren't a citizen here, what the culture shock was like for you and what it was like going home and experiencing reverse culture shock. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to join me every Sunday where travel and adventure build financial freedom. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.